Hey, David on Earth here. Can you think of anything more important than socks?
Wang!
Today I want to talk about what we wear on our little piggies out there while we're hiking and why it's important to have the right stuff. Stay tuned. Now, socks are about as personal as, any clothing choice, right? You're gonna size, fit, utility, whatever works for you is what you should do. For a long time, I tried to solve this puzzle on my own, but I did find some science here recently that explains what I eventually did and why it worked. So let's take a look at some of the science. There's one particular article that kind of makes a nice little summary of the stuff that I learned about hiking socks. It's from the American Academy of Podiatric Sports Medicine. Now, it's only been since the 1980s that we started seeing studies come out about fiber technology and sock construction that has really formed the basis for what we're doing today as a best practice for socks and hiking. Now, what are hikers most concerned about with their feet while they're out there hiking, especially long distance? Well, it's, toenail issues, it's blisters. You'll hear a lot of talk about blisters and how to prevent them. It's about infections. Sometimes we get infections in our feet. And it's also this injuries to sub-tissues, like on your pads on your feet, or maybe the calluses, they become cracked and stuff. You see a lot of that with long distance hikers. So what causes those injuries? Now, while we're hiking, our feet take a beating, right? There's all kinds of forces that are on our feet while we're hiking. There's ground reaction forces. When you're stepping down, the earth can only absorb so much of that pressure. The rest of it comes back up into your feet. That's a lot to deal with. Sometimes 3 times as much as your body weight goes back up into your feet. Then there's other kind of shearing forces. There's forward forces, that is the momentum going forward. There's aft forces, when you're going backwards. There's lateral forces for when you go sideways, ever slip off a rock and now you have to adjust forces. And then there's also torque forces when you land a certain way and you got to twist a little bit. And then, of course, there are other factors. It's the type of ground and surface that you're walking on. It's your footwear, the actual shoes that you wear. It's the socks. And it's also moisture that builds up on your feet during hiking. And it's a combination of all those forces and all those factors that cause friction on your feet and can cause blisters and other injuries to happen while you're on the trail. So let's talk more about specifically socks and having the right socks and how that can help fix a lot of this. So how do socks help out in all of this? Well, it's primarily in the types and blends of fabrics, of fibers, in the manufacturing process. Okay, it's time for a little terminology. So the term that we use to describe how a fabric absorbs moisture is called hydrophilic. So cotton is the most hydrophilic compared to like wool, acrylics, or any other kind of synthetic fibers out there. Cotton absorbs more water than all of them. The thing about the behavior of cotton is that, yes, it will absorb a lot of water, but what it doesn't do is pull that water away from your skin and onto other drier fibers within the cotton material. And that's called capillary action. Cotton tends to absorb moisture and to retain moisture longer and closer to your skin, as compared to acrylic or wool fibers. So let's talk about acrylic fibers a little bit. So when acrylic fibers get wet, they will swell to maybe like 5% of their normal size, whereas cotton will go up to like 45% of its normal size, and wool is a little bit less, about 35%. Now, why is that important? Now, when swollen fibers are compressed, they lose all the air that's in between the fibers, and that reduces their ability to transfer moisture, and you need that transfer of moisture away from your skin in order to prevent, the causes of those injuries that we have to our feet. Now, I said wool swells to about 35% of its normal size. That's normally pretty bad, but the interesting characteristic about wool, natural wool fibers, is that they tend to be great insulators even if they are wet. So that's why we like wool instead of cotton. So that's why we have wool that's blended with acrylic fibers, and that's what you see over in hiking stores on the shelf. It isn't 100% wool typically. It's usually a blend with some sort of acrylic fibers. So when you blend those two fibers together, what you have is a high capillary effect and also a great insulator. Alright, so let's talk about everybody's favorite subject, blisters. If you've been hiking for any amount of time, I don't care who you are, you're going to get a blister someday, somewhere on your feet. So people get a lot of them. When I first started hiking, I had like every piece of skin on my foot taped up because it was bad. I couldn't figure out what was going on. Well, it was a bad combination of shoes and socks, and I just didn't know what I was doing. And I learned a few things along the way. So what really causes blisters? Well, there's a lot of opinions out there. What the science says is that there's essentially three different factors. There's the shear forces I talked about earlier. There's also pressure points from your footwear. And then there's moisture. But just a moderate amount of moisture is really where the danger zone is. Now, the right kind of socks can do a lot to fix that. There were some military studies done back in the 1990s because there was a lot of injuries out on training fields with a lot of soldiers getting a lot of blisters, hospitalizations, all kinds of stuff. So this was one of the biggest studies ever done on how to take care of your feet and how to not get blisters. So it was important for me to go take a look at that. And what it showed me is that they come up with the best way to prevent blisters, at least in these studies, was a double layer system. So they had an acrylic layer on the bottom closest to your feet, almost 100% acrylic kind of fiber. Then on top of that, there was some kind of natural fiber or natural fiber blend, wool blend with some acrylics on top of that. So that was when they did that, their number of blisters went way down. So hey, there's a lesson learned, and I think you might have noticed in the hiking community, a lot of folks out there talking about the double sock thing. That's where it came from. Let's also understand, and this might be obvious for most of us, that there is an interplay between the socks you have on your feet and the shoes that you wear, right? So think about it as a continuum, right? Your feet are gonna gather a lot of moisture because our feet sweat, and also there is sweat dripping down from our leg. It gets to our feet. Our feet becomes kind of the repository for all of this moisture. So what you want to do is you want to pull that moisture away from your feet, and that's that acrylic layer, and then you put a natural wool layer on top of that, a natural wool blend on top of that, and it has that natural capillary effect to pull in that moisture away from your feet. Now, how the shoes come into this is that your shoes should be breathable. They should be made of some kind of acrylic material because that'll pull even more moisture out. And then when it hits the air, when it's breathable, when you can, shoes that you can almost see through, you want them breathable. Then that creates that continuum, and when it gets to the air, it'll evaporate and it'll keep pulling that moisture away from your feet, and that's really the perfect place to be. When you hear hikers talk about shoes that dry really fast, that's what it is. It's that whole capillary effect that's pulling moisture away, and it hits the air. Your feet are very breathable in these shoes, and the air flows through and it dries them really fast. Now, in this scientific article I've been talking about, it has some recommendations for what kind of socks you should have. So for hikers in the summertime, you should have crew socks. You don't want low cut socks because they will typically bunch up and get out of there and cause a lot of irritations. So they recommend crew socks. So they recommend a crew sock that's padded or double layered, made out of acrylic material or acrylic wool blends. So what do I use? Well, it took a lot of experimenting and quite a few years. You know, if I would have ran across this article years ago, it would have saved me a lot of time and a lot of pain. But I ended up actually pretty close to what they're recommending in this article. So I have my liners are these Injinji socks, these little toe socks. I was out on a trail maintenance crew once, and I was sitting around camp at night. I just had these on, and one guy, what are those things? Never seen them before, but super comfortable. They keep your feet separated, and there's also you know, more surface area here to pull away moisture, especially between your toes. So that's what the benefit of these are. So these are my outerwears. These are all acrylic socks, by the way. And then I have a merino wool blend sock on top of that. And it's usually my my darn tough socks here. Blink. I've been wearing these for a lot of years. I think they're just starting to get worn out a little bit on the heel. These have a lifetime warranty, so they're pretty cool. And I have you know, different colors of these things. Some are a little bit lighter, some are a little bit heavier. Just depends on what time of year, what kind of footwear I'm wearing. So I'll be careful about how thick I make these, or not. You know, I have one here that's kind of a mid-weight, and that's really, you can feel the difference here because yeah, it's pretty thick. So I'll wear these in the winter time, as long as I have a little bit of space in my shoe. It keeps me nice and warm. So that's what I wear. I'm also going to be experimenting this year with a couple different things. Creepers puts out these socks. There are also toe socks, but they have a really cool design. They actually, you know, they have a good marketing team because it made it sound like I need to try these things. But on the top here, it's really thin, so it's really super breathable on top. A lot of cushion on the bottom. Some good pads. Now these are seam free, so that you have no irritating spots on your feet because there's no seams on them. So I'm going to check these out, Creepers. I'll let you know how they work. I tried them I think twice on the trail already, but it was winter time. My feet got a little cold, so I didn't find these were great for winter time. So I'm going to try them this summer. This other one that I'm trying is called Silverlight. Now these are not toe socks, but the construction on these things are pretty amazing. They actually have real silver thread in here, and silver is great for taking away bacteria. And it's a merino wool blend, but a lot of acrylic material in there. You can feel they're just different. And they're padded really well. Again, a lifetime warranty on these things. And there's even a left and a right sock, so they're shaped for your foot. This is my left foot. They're shaped for your foot, so there's no irritating spots on here, and these are seam free as well. So I might be able to get away with only wearing one pair of socks. So I'm going to try these out. I had a lot of great reviews on them, and I'll let you know how that turns out. But that's coming up a little bit later. Hey, listen, I hope you enjoyed this. There's a lot to learn about socks. It took me years actually to dial in all this stuff, where you have the benefit of knowing all this right now. Brilliant! So hope you appreciate the information, and hope you can use it. If you found it useful, go ahead and press that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. I got a lot of cool stuff coming up, a lot of great hikes this year. Can't wait to tell you about it. I'll probably put out a video here soon about some of the things I plan to do this summer. So I'll see you on the trail.